As a society, our collective lifestyles in 2021 are wholly different to the way they were 15 years ago. I can order food without leaving my sofa. I can buy games without leaving my sofa. And I can tell everyone facts without leaving my sofa. Also, global pandemic, which is very good. We live in a strange time, and it can be draining as all of these different games, apps, products and services battle it out day and night, vying for our attention, whilst we await Ragnarok. Not the game now, the actual thing. So with that in mind, a little while back I decided to break away from the hustle and bustle of being stuck inside my own house, and I stepped back out into Liberty City, circa 2008, in a little game called Grand Theft Auto 4.
Life is complicated. I killed people, smuggled people, sold people. Perhaps here, things will be different.
Now, full disclosure, there's a little bit more to me jumping back into GTA 4 in 2021 than just lockdown boredom and an unhealthy interest in weirdly fitted tracksuits. You see, some time ago I unearthed an online archive of podcasts that I used to listen to when I was a teenager. Just humour me here for a moment, alright? Some of you in the UK and Ireland may remember PSM, an unofficial PlayStation mag that ran throughout the 2000s and into the teens, 10s, whatever we're meant to call that fucking decade. Anyway, they made a podcast and it was great. And much like the mags themselves and their free DVDs, the podcast is a fantastic little microcosm of the games industry in and around that era. In one episode, the magazine's editor, Daniel Dawkins, had just come back from a review event for GTA 4. And at one point in the discussion, he mentioned an article he had been reading online regarding GTA 4, and how it could potentially be the last ever next-gen game we would see as an industry. Now, the article he was referring to cited rising costs and the boom or bust blockbuster model that was becoming popular in games and movies at the time being too risky to last. But as I listened to Dan recall his experiences with the then new GTA 4, that notion, that theory of Grand Theft Auto 4 being the last ever next-gen title really stuck with me, and at the time I wasn't exactly sure why. So I decided to jump in, load up the game on Series X, and come to my own conclusions regarding that hypothesis.
During the war, we did some bad things, and bad things happened to us. War is where the young and stupid are tricked by the old and bitter into killing each other. I was very young and very angry. Ramen! Are you sleeping, you fat fuck?
Now, look, of course it's absolutely mental to say that the last ever next-gen game came out in 2008. We've had several new console generations since then, hundreds of new games, and a worldwide recession. But as I began to play through GTA 4 once again, as I stepped through the opening hours of Niko Bellic's fish out of water story, it really began to click with me. And yeah, in many different ways, Grand Theft Auto 4 really was the last ever next-gen game. Alright, see yous now lads, good luck, thanks. So, I think it's important to give a bit of context here. The run-up to GTA 4's release was unlike anything the industry had seen before. It was seismic, even though it would seem tame compared to the hype and the marketing surrounding big releases nowadays. But you gotta remember, 2008 was a time when it was still a novelty to see games advertised on the telly, or on a man's arm. In a time before games were all things for all people, before everyone in your family actively played some kind of game on their phone, Grand Theft Auto was the most notorious and well-known franchise in existence. It stretched its influence out beyond the realm of games, and thanks to a string of well-publicised controversies and attempts by big ignorants to scapegoat the living shit out of it, it was a prime example of there being no such thing as bad publicity, perhaps with the exception of the CEO arm. Fucking state of that, man. The games industry was entering a new groove in the run-up to GTA 4's release. Plenty of gamers were underwhelmed by the jump in tech we had seen moving from the PS2 to the PS3, and GTA 4 was long heralded as being the game, the one that would finally capitalise on the Imagineering that Sony and Microsoft had been shitting on about for the last 4 E3 conferences. It was meant to be a true next-gen game, and the frequency of those had grown thin since the PS2 and PS1 generations. Back then, it felt like a new genre-defining experience, a new boundary pusher was being released every single week. Little did we know, with GTA 4's elongated development and mega-hyped release, we were witnessing the opening act of the AAA industry's shift into what we have today. the risk-averse, investor-led shitshow that is big gaming. Big Kotick's big game in 2022, man. Fucking, Jimothy Ryan. So what was GTA 4 actually like then? It was pretty good, wasn't it? I mean, it was alright. It had the weight of hype and expectation absolutely crushing its shoulders, and it still managed to come through as a relatively well-revered game, unlike this one. Now, it was met with rave reviews, 9s and 10s across the board, unlike this. Oh, hang on a minute now. After the initial wave of praise though, GTA 4 actually settled with something of a mixed reaction among gamers. Some fans took umbrage with the smaller map the game had in comparison to its predecessor. Some criticised the repetitive mission structure, and the limited number of side activities and the limited amount of stores that you could spend your hard-earned crime bucks in was a pain point for fans too. Yeah, I mean it was by no means a perfect game, that's been well documented. But revisiting the game now, in 2021, is arguably a more enjoyable experience than playing the thing when it originally released. And that's thanks to 14 years of stagnation, Far Cry sequels, and games that are a film. Fucking think you're IMAX or something, do you? What makes Grand Theft Auto 4 so special though, is that it committed wholeheartedly to a set of completely new design principles, and that it didn't just ride the coattails of the mega success that San Andreas was. Rockstar Games could have easily stuck with the same outdated engine they had used previously, or they could have just transplanted San Andreas' mechanics into another off-the-shelf engine like Unreal. But instead, they were brave enough to pare the game's environment back to a single city, make their own engine, and reapproach every single design decision they had ever come up against again with fresh eyes. And that in particular is the hallmark of a true next-gen experience. Absolutely everything, from the vehicle handling, to the character animation, to the way weapons function in the game. Love it or hate it, it was a top-to-bottom reinterpretation of what GTA was and could be for a new generation of machines. There was a concerted attempt to sweat the details, particularly when it came to how NPCs and even the environment itself reacted to Nico being there. The game had a physicality to it that felt weighty, and although it's slightly cumbersome by today's standards, it did give you a greater sense of presence in the world, and that serves as an undeniably important component of GTA 4's identity. Here's another good example actually, the game's camera. When you're walking around outside in GTA 4, and you tilt the camera up to marvel at one of the city's many landmarks, it widens the FOV and adopts this kind of fisheye filter in an attempt to make the thing in the background really big and you really, really small. And it works. When you hop into a car to do some sick forward rolls out of the windscreen, the camera is tight and slightly offset to one side. Elements like this were capitalizing on all of that fabled next-gen power really artistically, and they were putting it to really good use here. These were all incredibly brave design decisions, given that there was so much riding on this very, very expensive piece of entertainment. Above all else, however, and this is the thing that stands out to me the most, GTA 4 was an honest-to-God attempt to put a little simulation of New York into the box under your telly. And even as a AAA game, no creative risk seemed out of the question or out of reach. Again, revisiting all of these different mechanics and ideas in 2021 feels like a breath of fresh air. And oddly enough, the once cutting-edge GTA 4 and its contemporary late 2000s setting has managed to shake its reputation of being archaic and forgotten and re-emerge as something of a period piece, not only in its setting, but also in its design philosophy. Speaking of which actually, GTA 4 being set in 2008 results in it having an older setting when played now than San Andreas had when it was released in 2004. Yeah, how's that for feeling like a big fucking skeleton? GTA 4 did everything that it didn't need to do, and that morphed the series past being cutting edge and into something that was genuinely forward looking. And that brings me back to that original question. Was GTA 4 the last ever next-gen title? Was it the last ever game to do this? Well, to be honest, I can't think of another sequel that sought to redefine the series it belonged to quite as much as GTA 4 did in 2008, on a AAA level at least. Nor can I think of a sequel that did that whilst also pushing the medium forward in every single metric either. In visuals, in gameplay, in vertical depth, Grand Theft Auto 4 raised the watermark in all of these metrics permanently. You could compare, perhaps maybe, Sony Santa Monica's God of War reboot as being on the same tier of positive reimagining. But as incredible as that game is as an experience, God of War didn't really do anything fundamentally new or different as a game, on a core level. An even better point of comparison would probably be GTA 4's sequel, which you might be surprised to find out is called Grand Theft Auto 5. GTA 5 almost feels like it was built to be the binary opposite of what GTA 4 was. Recenter the camera, make the game feel snappier, adopt more traditional weapon handling, all of those little quirks that made GTA 4 such a unique gameplay experience were carved away in order to reduce any friction or unfamiliarity that could scare off new players. I think for most people, GTA 5 is the better game out of the two, and that's a perfectly acceptable opinion. But Rockstar's mission to build a more accessible single-player experience was surely aimed first and foremost at laying the groundwork for the inevitable money machine that GTA Online turned into. And that's a bit sad, don't you think?
Ramen! Are you sleeping, you fat fuck? Come on!
What's the time?
It's even sadder if we widen our lens out to the entire AAA games industry, where you can see that a similar mentality has taken hold. With the biggest franchises out there, creative vision serving as the key component of a game's success has largely been replaced by the big funny dollar hunt, where various different golden geese are lauded over and then abandoned in a cycle. In 2010, it was online multiplayer. In 2016, it was microtransactions. And now, it's a combination of both, wrapped in a calculated marketing model that sees players' attention retained roughly 24 hours a day via Twitter, YouTube, Twitch, and within the games themselves. It's a far cry from the... Get that fucking series out of here, man. It's a far cry from the mentality that prevailed amongst developers and publishers from around 1997 to 2008. The most successful publishers during that period knew that in order for a game to sell, in order for them to get that return on investment, the game had to be good. It had to break new ground, and developers were chomping at the bit to secure financial backing from publishers so that they could make that happen. Grand Theft Auto as a series is living proof of that mentality, as is Halo, Resident Evil, Katamari Damacy, Metal Gear Solid, and dozens of other franchises that are still prominent today. I guess you could say that the gimmick back in those days was making a decent fucking game, eh? How's that, eh? How's that for fucking, I don't know, Jimothy Ryan? So, I think that in a sense, you could say that Grand Theft Auto 4 represented the death of a certain type of ambition being present in AAA games. The type of ambition that the industry, even today, still unashamedly applies to the concept of next gen. That idea that every single metric that a game could be judged on was to be pushed forward as much as possible. The idea that design decisions had to be reapproached because the old way just didn't cut it anymore. It no longer exists, and it hasn't for 13 years. Yeah, Grand Theft Auto 4 was the last next-gen game, and I don't think we'll ever see the likes of it again. How's that for a happy ending, you pack of bastards?